You think that women were more on clothing, but the two witnesses I had in worst case scenario, the guy was looking at the clothing and the backpack. And you would think that a woman would be more interested in clothing, but she was looking at the guy. And you just find that everybody's different, and you can tell when you're talking to somebody that really knows what they're talking about. And that's my job, is to tell the investigation who's the best witness.
Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
Ray, I am doing very well. How are you this evening? You look great, as always.
Well, thank you, sir.
That could be deceiving, I know, with the makeup.
That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. I'm going to have to get a clip of that so I can put it on my website. But anyways,
our guest is Robert Exter.
Our guest today is Robert Exter. Robert's a professional artist with over 30 years of experience. He specializes in portraits, graphic design, police sketch art, and courtroom media. Robert, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, Robert, thank you. Obviously, Ray and I, we know each other pretty well. We joke a bit, but once we have our guest on, do you prefer Robert, Rob, Bob? Do you have a choice?
Robert's fine. Rob, I was Bob to death by my parents, so I don't like that, but Rob's fine.
Yeah. Well, let's stick with Rob then. So we have a Unabomber connection that we're going to get into later in our interview. And I've heard your name. I first heard your name in 1995 when I was sent as a brand new FBI profiler out to the Unabomber task force. And I was shown this composite sketch. And I always said, oh, it looks pretty good. But as I learned in life, you never really know how good a composite sketch looks until, of course, someone is identified. But then I was told that, well, it's not the only sketch we have. And Robert, we'll get to that story in a little bit. But we want to hear a little bit about your life. We always like to start out in the beginning with our guests and walk us through a little bit where you grew up. I know you had military service. And tell us how the whole composite sketch artist, forensic artist, how that all came about. So take us from your earliest days and let's walk our audience through from the beginning.
Keep it short. I was born in San Fernando, and that's a suburb of L.A. And my parents, middle class, very good to me. I only have one brother and no sisters, but they gave me everything that I ever wanted, and I went to regular schools, but I just happened to have a flair for art. So when I got into the service, I kept a sketch pad with me, and I went to Hawaii. I was in Hawaii for 2 years, and I would go around with my sketch pad when I was off duty and sketch people, and I got paid for it. And so I learned a little bit along the way. Then when I got out, I decided to live in Sacramento, and I was doing sketches for the newspapers, and I thought that I saw this East Area rapist sketch on the TV, and I said, well, it looks like that's pretty basic work. I could do a lot better than that. So I went and offered my services to the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, which they're like the police department for the North area in Sacramento, and they were handling the East Area case at that time. I never worked on one of those cases, but they started to use me, and the first guy I got, it was only 27 calls, and 3 of them were people that knew him, and it was a armed robber. I saw 56 counts of armed robbery all of a sudden. It was just overnight, practically. And it was an undercover agent that actually pulled him over with all the evidence they needed in his car. Basically, I got my start, and they started using me on a lot of cases, and I was solving things. And the newspaper decided. My brother at the time wanted me to move to Canada, but there was a newspaper article that came out, and I knew this Don Hohenschel, he was the editor, but he didn't know I was doing work for him in the newspaper, but I didn't brag about it. He didn't know I was the guy that was doing the artwork for the police department. And they interviewed the artist that I had replaced at the sheriff's department as if they did my work. And yeah, they didn't say that he didn't do it. He just told them all about the artwork, and they showed my work. And I said, well, if you guys don't need me, I'm going to go to Canada. So I went to Canada. And 3 years later, they started sending me down because they said, we couldn't find anybody. We tried lots of artists, but you're the one that works the best with us. And that's Robert, how I got places.
Okay, let's back up a little bit. You enjoyed art, being an artist when you were younger in the military. Any formal training at all?
No.
Self-taught all the way.
Also taught. I'm a logical person. I can see things. I can look at a painting and see how they did it. You know, how the person put it together, and it's logic. It's the same with criminal work. You know, it's binary. You know, if you got a witness, one picture is going to look more like a person than the other, and you just binary it to where it is a good likeness of what they have in their memory.
Well, let me ask you this question here. Did most of your sketches, police sketches, did they come from witnesses, or
Yes.
it came from witnesses? All right.
Yes.
Well, how would you, for our audience, how would you translate a witness's description into your visual representation?
Well, I started out with a Scotland Yard photo kit. They have a photo kit for doing composites. And I needed features, you know, separate features, so that, you know, if I wanted to work on noses, eyes, or mouth separately, I had them separated. I've evolved to where actually a good witness can work with full face. You can go through any annual or anything, and they can pick out features of individuals that are the same. But you talk to the witness, and you go, sometimes you go down, you visit the place that the person was seen, and you look at the lighting, the obstacles, and the things and you get an idea of the lighting, you know, and then you work with a witness. And sometimes they can do it fast if they're a really good witness. It only takes a night to do it. But there have been times. Well, the Unabomber was like 10 days, you know, that I was working there. But you know, it is the witness. I let the witness guide me by saying yes and no, because I'm going to come up. They tell me why the eyes are this way, and if they say he's got a big nose, well, that means he's got deep set eyes. You know, because I know how to analyze the structure of a skull. And everybody's got the same proportions in their face. We all have these little things that make likenesses. And you'd be surprised how I could show you how the face is proportioned. Everything works out, but there's different depths and things that make our likenesses. You know, skin, and some people are heavier, some people are thinner, you know. I mean, you have to know what you're doing. To me, what I see what's wrong with a lot of composites is the skill level of the artist. They've got the interview down, but you gotta learn how to draw fast and accurately, so it's workable, you know, because you can't work forever on something.
Now, obviously, the length of time between when a witness saw, we'll say, a bad guy, and you're interviewing them could make a difference, right? 1 day as opposed to 1 week, as opposed to a month or beyond. I'm sure that's a factor, right?
It is a factor, but the better the witness, the more they're stimulated by what they saw. You know, like I did a number for worst case scenario, and I had to tell the director, you know, are you going to have a person, they were going to demonstrate things, and I said, are you going to have somebody point a gun at somebody so that they'll remember it? Or is it going to be, are you going to ask somebody for the time of day and expect you to know the guy you asked the time of the day for? Well, if you had a gun pointed at you, you're never going to want to be in the same place with that person pointing the gun again. That's called a visual stimulation. And a good witness has a good stimulated memory. And that's why there's differences in witnesses. Some witnesses are not as good as others. And you have to, that's part of the job, is to tell the investigation what you think of the witness. So
I'm sure, Robert, that you've had witnesses, like Jim said, there's been some time that's passed, and their recollection is very vague. How do you handle when someone is like that in your interview process? And the other thing, what if you have someone in a second part two of that question, is if they're inconsistent in what they're saying?
Well, I'd have to tell the investigation if they're not good. I want to say this guy's not too good or this lady is not too good. But what I do ask them is, if you saw the person again, would you recognize them? And that tells me whether or not I've got somebody to work with. And they say, oh, how tall was he? Well, I have them point to somebody that's the same height. I don't ask them to formulate an opinion in their head. She'll say about that same height as that guy over there, and you ask that guy, what's your height? That's how you get it. It's a memory process. And you can't ask somebody to be a genius at converting weights and measures and things like that when you're talking to them. And, it's a really interesting thing, but you can tell if somebody's really stimulated or somebody really has seen the person and remembers them. Like in that worst case scenario, there was one witness. They showed it right on the screen. There was only one looking at the guy when he went by. And I got him at least to yell at the people and act a little bit mean so that somebody would be interested. And you could see that one guy was watching him run away, but the lady watched him all the time. And I was lucky enough to get that lady as a witness, and I was able to do the drawing fairly fast. And the only thing I got wrong was his goatee was a little wider than I had on it. But of course, when they put him in the lineup, nobody had any facial hair. So they were trying to catch us, but I still got them. It was a fun project.
Rob, you opened the door to just now to women, men. Men are known to be sort of visual related. Women maybe not so much, but they can also be very attentive to facial and figure representations. Do you have what's your track record in terms of interviewing men witnesses, interviewing women witnesses, in terms of who ultimately would give you the better description?
Well, everybody's an individual, and I've seen it goes across the line with them.
Sure.
You think that women were more on clothing, but the two witnesses I had in worst case scenario, the guy was looking at the clothing and the backpack, and you would think that a woman would be more interested in clothing, but she was looking at the guy, and you just find that everybody's different. And you can tell when you're talking to somebody that really knows what they're talking about. And that's my job, is to tell the investigation who's the best witness. There was one time I was working for the Sacramento Sheriffs, and they had a serial killer going around, and he had tied some lady up in an apartment that she was showing him, and tortured her. But there was one kid that was a witness, and there was a lady that was beat up by him at a video store. I had to do it in the hospital. And we tried to figure out which one we would trust, the little boy who was a young kid or this lady. And she was beat up and everything, and she did the best job, but we put both of the composites in instead of just having one in the newspaper. We had both. And that's how we did it. But they were asked, it was really hard to figure out whether a kid would be better than an adult. Some people think that children are better at identification, but I don't think you can classify like that. It's individual.
Just out of curiosity, how old was this child you're referencing?
I think they were talking like about a 10-year-old child.
Okay.
Or a little younger, maybe 9 or something like that.
Well, let me ask you this, Robert. In all the sketches you've done, are there certain facial features that are more difficult to sketch or describe accurately than others?
No, not really. I've done a lot of different things, and all I have to do is get an example of what I have to put on there. Like if they was wearing a hat, I have to know what kind of hat, and then you have to go through all different kinds of clothing, and no, I can pretty much handle most. What I do for a living is when I'm not a police artist, at the time I was making my living, I'd go to a mall and I would sketch somebody right in front of me. I prefer that. I work with photographs, but I don't believe in that's if the guy's alive and he can sit. I'd rather do a sitting, because then I get to visit and figure out what the best face is. What's the real person? What's the real look? And so I talk to him. I don't want him to hold still. I talk to him, and I remember the moment that I like, and I keep looking to it, looking at that while I'm doing the picture. And I eventually get the picture done. And it doesn't, if somebody wants to hold still, they're probably going to hold the face that they don't have. Not something anybody would want.
Well, Robert, I wasn't really talking about you sketching it. I was talking about the witnesses trying to describe to you.
Yeah, I know.
And have you found that they're pretty easy in describing?
Yeah.
They don't have difficulty with one area versus the other, or they're just
Yeah,
real good
because
with
I give them a book, and if they say I would recognize them, I know I'm working with somebody that I can show my examples to and whittle it down to what the person looked like. I don't work for a police department. I don't do the sketches all the time, so maybe I have maybe I've done 100, maybe I've done 50. I don't know. I didn't really count them, but I don't think I've done 100 composites for the police. I usually was called in because they needed an expert that was really good at sketching, and that's what I do for a living, and I happen to have been lucky enough to work with the police successfully. So one department, like when I worked for the Green River Task Force, I hadn't done the Unabomber. I was just another artist. They had several artists they used, and they flew me from Vancouver Island to Seattle several times. So, it's I'm an artist, and I was happy-go-lucky. I just like to visit with people and do a good job of a portrait, and I was popular that way. And it was a little town I lived in. Nanaimo's maybe 100,000 people at the time, and I would keep busy all year. Christmas was the biggest time, boy. I was overworked. It was just, yeah. Anyway.
Rob, every once in a while, I know Ray's worked a few of these in his life. It's a robbery of some sort, bank, armored car, and it's an inside job. And it turns out that one of the tellers was in on it, one of the bank guards, something like that. Not all the time, but every once in a while. I'm wondering if you ever sat down with someone and you somehow thought they were purposefully giving you a bad description. And do you think you could have picked up on that on your own?
I can't recollect anybody doing that. I've had stupid mistakes. Like there was this one guy that I was interviewing this lady, and I said, what did the guy look like? And he says, oh, well, the bartender knows him. And I said, well, and I got that. I don't think the detective was too happy with himself because it sounds like he could have done pretty well without me. Anyway. No, I think that the police, usually when they put a witness with me, they've pretty much put them through the test themselves. They're worried about it. And if they happen to say something that kind of gives them away, I would certainly tell the investigation. But I never had anything like that happen.
That's what we call in our business, Jim and I, we call that a ground ball. When the bartender, we call it a ground ball. It's an easy out.
And usually a polygraph exam and some other evidence or lack thereof will tell us this person was involved, and let's not waste the sketch artist's time in that regard. I remember, and Robert, you can correct me, but I think it was called Identisketch or Identigo, something like that. Some company, I remember in the 80s, came out with a kit that it wasn't, and this is kind of pre-computer.
That's a Scotland Yard kit.
Okay. I remember a detective on my former police department, Ben Salem PD, good guy, good detective, but it looked like almost every composite he came up with was kind of resembled a Martian, with kind of the round head and I mean, it'd be a little bit different mustache, hair. And I know he tried his best, but we were pretty sure it wasn't Martians committing these robberies and burglaries and things like that.
There was a lot of sightings back then, Jim.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, perhaps, but it all, seemed to rely on this one kid. And I guess you would pull in, it was like a box, and you would put in different like head shapes and hair designs and mustache and eyes. So I'm not sure you were even really drawing anything.
No, the kit has the eyes, ears, and nose in a book, and then it's got a number on it. And then you put it has another kit with the same, a larger version. And they actually put it on a piece of a clipboard and assemble that. And you can make big mistakes with the Scotland Yard kit and have your proportions off. And I can see how he's talking about it looking like a Martian. And learning how to do an interview is very important. And there's varying abilities. Not everybody's good at everything. I'm definitely not as good at English. I wouldn't be a very good speaker anywhere except I probably could teach art well, but in any other subject, no, I would be terrible at English. I wouldn't be good at, even though I can do things in my head, I wouldn't be somebody I'd want to lecture anybody on math. You know, everybody's different. Everybody's different, and that's how we identify them. You know, I've met a lot of detectives that don't think that composites work. You know, but I think I've proven to them it's really, some people have a flair for it and some people don't, because a lot of eyewitnesses, like I say, I've just had a few, but I have found very few that I've worked with that I couldn't get something positive from. And I think it's I got to give a lot of credit to my first contact in police, Ray Biondi. He ran a really good department. He had a very, very good homicide. He was a homicide detail, and my first composite was an armed robber, but it was usually homicide that used me, homicide or rape, the rape department. So,
Rob, you sent me some emails in advance with some sketches that you've done over the years, and we're going to have our producer put them up in post. So if you're just listening to this podcast, it's going to be a little bit tougher, but check out our website, coldredpodcast.com. Go on YouTube for some of these. Let me just hold this up to you real quick. Now, these look pretty darn good to me. Do you remember this particular case? What PD?
Yeah, that was called the mechanic murder, and I did that just before I was sent to Salt Lake City to do the Unabomber, and that's actually a color composite, and that was done by a sheriff deputy. He was seen in a car that wasn't his. He was going very slow through a neighborhood in Sacramento, and there wasn't any report of any theft of a car or a murder at the time. But later on, they found out that this guy he was in the murdered individual's car, and I had to dig for that, because when I came back, they didn't say, "Hey, look how you did." I had to dig that one up, and I was really surprised at how accurate that policeman was at giving me a description.
Well, and your composite sketch was very accurate too, looking at the picture side by side. That was 1987, Sacramento Sheriff's Department.
Right.
And this guy killed a mechanic and took his life savings. Bad guy.
Yeah. He the guy, the mechanic, didn't like banks, and so he kept everything at the house. You know, his pillow, I guess.
And he paid the price for that. And this is the eye murderer, right? Also 1987?
Yeah, that's very interesting, because they had Kibbe, what was his name?
Roger Kibbe.
Roger Kibbe. He was in jail for beating up a prostitute. And he was due to be let out of prison, out of there. He had done his time. He was almost there. And they thought he was the killer. And the witness they had was down in Norco prison, and they had given him a couple of lineups. You know, you know what they are. It was photo lineup they know that these 4 photographs are not the guy, but the one they think is there is one of the 5. And he was wishy-washy, and they didn't know whether to put him into a physical lineup to where he would actually have Kibbe there in a lineup, standing in front of him behind the glass. And they sent me down, and that grumpy picture that looks like a little bit of each one is what I came up with. Made sure that I didn't know what he looked like, but I made sure that they gave me bunches of photographs of men the same age, but none of the mugshots I went down there with were of Kibbe. So, yeah, that was a very successful one, and I was on trial. That's the only time I was put on trial, because the defense thought maybe I knew what the guy looked like, and so I had drawn a picture of who I visited. No, I went down blind.
Well, that's very interesting. I didn't realize that. So the defense called you as a witness to try to impeach you, more or less, over the composite sketch? Okay, right. And that was you don't get composite sketch artists on the witness stand very often, from what I know.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. Well, that's because usually they catch them with traceable evidence that is more positive than a witness. All I'm doing is taking a description from the eyewitness, and the eyewitness I just serve as proof that what the eyewitness saw, and I'm there for support in the trial of that eyewitness usually. But no, I was on trial there because they thought that I was eyeballing the man on trial before I went down to do the composite, and that wasn't true. I didn't know anything about what he looked like.
Robert, everybody, Jim, me, we all have that one case that was kind of special for whatever reason, and it could be 100 different reasons. Out of all the cases you had the opportunity to work with the police, what's that one case and you say, man, that was a great case that I worked?
I don't know. There were several that were very interesting. The lookalike of me in the second composite was the most interesting to me.
Well, that's Unabomber. Let's hold off on Unabomber.
Let's hold off on
okay, right.
But give me one other than that.
Let's see. Gee,
Well, I'll tell you what. Can I just show this? This was a guy who raped a 10-year-old girl, right?
Yes, I could tell you about that one. That was the first case I was flown down from Canada to do in Sacramento. And that's when I found out they were looking for all these other artists, and I was just the only one that they wanted. They decided they had to have me, so they would fly me all the way into Sacramento to do it because I worked with that homicide team. And I had two ladies picked me up in San Francisco, and on the way there, they said, "Oh, we got a surprise for you, Robert. You're going to be interviewed by all the news anchors when we get there, 20 minutes apiece." There were 3 of them, and they gave me credit for all the stuff I had done, and it was kind of like making up for that news article that I just told them. I says, "Well, you don't need me because here it says that I was, that." Their composite, they didn't mention it wasn't his work, it was my work, but I got no credit. Well, they gave me back all that credit that night, and I was like, had the keys to Sacramento that night. It was a really interesting experience. And I did solve the case. It was, the father finally turned him in. He didn't look like anybody in Sacramento, but he was living with his mother in San Diego, and it took the nerve of that sketch coming out that made the father turn his son in. He didn't want him getting away with that and ruining his life. Apparently the father was moral, but it took the second time in the paper before he came in. It takes a nerve to turn your own son in, I guess.
Yeah, it does.
Or your own brother, and we'll come up to the Kaczynski brothers in a bit. But yeah, let's quick here, and I think both you, Ray, and Rob, you brought this up. No police officer or FBI agent is going to get an arrest warrant based just on a composite sketch and someone's ID. They look at that, and usually it goes out to the public, right? In the old days in the newspaper, on TV, now on the internet, and they wait for people to call in or email, whatever, anonymously or give their name, looking for a reward or not, and that's when they get the person's name. Then the police do background information. Nowadays, cell phone records and maybe DNA, fingerprints, all that stuff. But even back in the day, in the 80s or so, they could still find out someone and get their record, and then they start building their case on that. You have helped solve some cases, no doubt, but it's when you give that composite, when someone then gives a name to attach to.
They need tangible evidence. They need tangible evidence to arrest somebody.
But you open the door for that when the other evidence doesn't exist in that regard.
The real evidence is the eyewitness and whether or not they can get other supportive evidence on the person they're arresting.
Let me show one more.
Of course not. Let me ask him this question first, Jim.
Okay.
Based upon the accuracy of all of the police sketches which you've done, what would you say the rate of accuracy is versus what the people actually look like?
Well, you're looking at some of them there. I've had a fair amount of mine have been pretty accurate, almost like they could be sitting in front of me to do the portrait. It just depends on the eyewitness, how much they had to do, how close they were, or what the dealings were in their experience. Some are not as close as others, but I've had some really, really close lookalikes, and I could show you those. But I got a few of them on my website if anybody's interested.
What is your website? We'll mention it now and then again at the end.
RobertExter.com, but in there you can go to links to different things. You got to go to my police work, my professional site for that.
Okay. This is the last photo I'll show, but I know we have some other ones coming up. This guy looks a little bit like George Harrison to me in his young days, but the hair you got right, the mustache, looks like you may have cut off the little Frank Zappa chin whiskers there.
Yeah.
Remember the story?
Well, that one was Richard Chase, and he was
the vampire killer.
Yeah, and some lady, how we caught him is, I was just reading in this book, The Dracula Killer by Ray Biondi, the guy, the investigator, said was a great investigator. And he said that in the book that the lady was walking by a police unit and saw the sketch in there, and then it happened to be visiting her father-in-law, and she was urged to report the likeness. It was just, she looked in through the glass and saw the sketch laying on the seat. And that was interesting to hear how some of these are, how the person that identifies it from the media, how that would work. But that's how that one worked. And then they went through, they found out who it was, and they went through the DMV and went through all the pictures and found out he looked a lot like the sketch. The person that she identified, he said, I heard the detective say that he spent the day at the DMV going through all the photographs, and they found the picture of Richard Chase. And then they had to get him because he was killing a lot of people that week. There was 4 or 5. And
it was 1978 time frame.
Yeah. And I got him in the middle of my second sketch I was doing from another witness. I was lucky. I said, "Boy, that's good. That's great. We don't have to worry anymore." Because I want the solve. I want it solved. I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it to help the police, be a team member. So,
I want to get into Unabomber. Ray, any follow-up questions here to everything we discussed?
I just want to know, before you get into the Unabomber, because I think that'll take the rest of our time, is how has technology and the advances in technology changed the way you work? Has it affected you or not?
Well, I think that the forensic work came in, and when I was doing in '87, it took several weeks to get back forensic evidence. So that's basically why they sent me down to Norco there. And nowadays, you can get your forensic evidence really quick because they got labs all over the place. But what was happening is that I actually was stimulating the field of composite art at that time. It was coming into the realm. It was just before the forensic evidence was being introduced and as a tool. And I think that what really bothered me was that departments would get their own artists, but they wouldn't go and look for a good artist. They would find somebody that doodled good in their department, send them to Quantico and expect them to be that good. They should have gone in California, right there in Sacramento. You should go down to Ghirardelli Square in San Francisco and find a good portrait artist right there and said, you want to try your pencil at this. That would have been smart. But a lot of these management people, they just, said, oh, Sally is really good. I've seen her doodle before. I think I'll send her down to Quantico, instead of taking it serious and going after somebody with a real interview type thing or a real study of who you want. They were sending their sometimes friends to do the job. And that kind of hurts the field. If you get people that are not that good, it should be striving to find the best. That's the job, is to find the best work. If somebody's better than me, I don't mind stepping aside.
Well, Robert, how much of an impact do you think AI is going to have with your profession?
Well, look, you could certainly change. When it comes to videos, you can't believe anything now. I mean, you can put a crowd in there, and when there's not a crowd,
Yeah.
You can change all kinds of things to fool the public with AI. It's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to be difficult for everyone, in my opinion. I don't think anybody is going to escape the problem of worry over this kind of a way of masking everything.
I'm also wondering, too, with technology indirect to your field, Robert, and that is the surveillance state in which we now all live. Part of that is good. We can argue another podcast, how good or how bad. But, a lot of crimes now are committed, and there's someone, you have a pretty clear video representation of them, and maybe then you don't need the sketch artist. You just blow that up and digitize it.
Okay, I can elaborate on that. Not ever, sometimes the camera is pointed in a direction, so the artist would be brought in to straighten out the face.
There you go.
And you still have to know what you're doing when you change things, even if it's done with a video with your computer. It's important to know what you're doing so that you get better results out of it. Yeah, no, I'm all for the surveillance, except that it's Big Brother. If you handle it wrong, all of a sudden we got Big Brother, and you got some tyrant running everything.
Yeah. Well, that's we'll bring you back for that podcast, Robert, and we'll have some discussion about that. But let's go back.
With that.
Let's go back. I'm going to give a little bit of history, very brief, the Unabomber case, and I'm going to bring you right into it and what happened with you, Robert. So again, I'm still a police officer in 1978. I'm not involved at all with Unabomber, but the first bombs take place, bombing in Chicago. An airline is almost brought down at suburban Chicago. And we get up to about the 10th bombing, and there's basically no evidence in the Unabomber case. No fingerprints. This is pre-DNA, but not even any body fluids, blood, nothing. There's no indented writings on the two sort of ruse letters the Unabomber wrote back then. Nothing in the packaging. Basically no evidence at all until, I believe it was the 10th bombing in February of 1987 at a computer store in Salt Lake City.
Right.
And that's right. And for the first time ever, there was a witness who saw a person put down a device in the parking lot, which someone eventually kicked or picked up, whatever. And I don't believe there was a death on that case, but a serious injury. But I believe it was a woman inside at the cashier looking through a window. She saw the Unabomber put down this package. No name attached to it yet. So that's where I'm going to bring you in. That's what, they're doing the crime scene. Everyone's being treated medically, or at least the victim is. The Unabomber escapes. There's witnesses being interviewed, I believe. Then someone got involved and said, hey, this witness saw this bomber. What happens next, Rob?
Okay, I'd just done the mechanic murder drawing, and they said they were sending me to Salt Lake City, and I wasn't going to go back to Canada.
Who's they?
Homicide, Ray Biondi. They told me
that's
that
Sacramento, right?
Yeah, I was in Sacramento, and I was on a different case, and then they said, we want you to go to Salt Lake City. And so I got there. They took me to see the witness that night, and she had this first composite done by an FBI artist of the guy pinned to her with a magnet to her fridge. And I said, don't do that. You don't want to just keep looking at that. You're going to hypnotize yourself. You're an eyewitness. You're going to trust your memory. And so I instructed her, even if I got done with the drawing, nope, don't look at it. So
can I interrupt you here? Is this literally the night of the bombing or a day or two after?
No, it's when I got into Salt Lake City.
Which was how long after the...
Oh, I was March. It was March. Hugh Scruton was killed a few months before that. And the reason I was, they decided to use me is that the witness it was a black and white sketch she had, that the FBI had. And she says, I need a color. I need somebody that can work in color. And I was doing color work. So that's why I got sent there. Basically, Ray Biondi was now on the task force. It was made up of postal agents and ATF. They had one FBI in the management.
This is the first iteration of the task force. I don't think they even called it Unabomber Task Force 87. Right. The other one didn't start till 94. That's when I got involved, just so our audience can get kind of a time perspective here. Within a day or two, it sounds like you're flown into Salt Lake City. You sit down with this woman.
That's right. Now, it was two people that saw the owner of the shop and the secretary. Secretary was the one that looked through the blinds. And they both remarked it was a closed parking lot. I mean, you couldn't get out of it but that one way to go in there. So we were wondering why this guy was walking back through there with a hoodie on. And he put this thing down. They remarked that they liked his bum, you know. These are women for you. But
you don't sketch bums, do you?
Yeah, well, not the same meaning of that bum. I probably sketched bums.
Right. I know what you mean. I knew what you meant. For our English friends, they know what it means.
She saw the guy put the piece of wood down there with, and later I guess she went back and they didn't go out and look at it. When the son came in, the son of the owner, he got out and he saw the piece of wood down there in the way of the tire and everything. He got down to pick it up and I think it blew the tendons of his hand. And it wasn't a fatal injury. It was a minor, but that's what happened. And so to do that composite, I had an agent dress up at the same time in the morning with a hoodie on, so I could get the lighting right and everything, and kneel down by the same car the way she saw them through the blinds. And I took a picture with a Polaroid picture to get the coloring right. And it took me like a week or sorry. She was really good at the nose and the mouth and he had Ray-Ban type aviation glasses on. She couldn't remember exactly what kind of hair. She said it was bushy or, you know, and we just couldn't arrive at that. But either the chin, she says it was pointed, and she kept saying pointed. And I know now that what she was trying to say, it was like Popeye's chin coming out protruding. But I got it so close, I think, in the area around the eyes, nose, and the mouth, even with the glasses on, that he kind of saw himself a little bit in that. And he says that was a close one. And so he hid for, I think he hid for about 6 years. And then
you're getting into, again. Now you're into my realm, the behavioral realm. And Ray and I both know if a bank robber if a composite sketch goes out and he or she knows it pretty much looks like them, or even thinks it looks like them, they go dark and they don't act again. That means they're scared and they have enough self-control to do all that. So you have a sketch. Now, was that publicized throughout the media? That was before the internet, of course, but newspapers and TV?
It was in the Reader's Digest, and it was in, they did a program with, what was his name? The guy with the big nose. He was doing the wanted. It was, you know, most wanted.
Ronald Rivera?
No.
I don't know if he has a big nose or not.
Carl Malden.
Geez, okay, yeah.
He was doing the series on Unsolved Mysteries.
And they showed your composite.
Yeah, they showed my composite on that one. And it was also a national release, FBI release, or national composite release.
And back in those days, I'm not sure you can still walk into post offices and see wanted posters. I'm not sure it still does
either. But other than
the old days,
different.
In the old days, they'd be up there, right?
Yeah.
But
and it was just they had laser. They had lasers. Printers were just coming in, you know, and it would be a special thing to get a laser print of anything in those days. It wasn't like you could go put through a copy machine easy.
So I'm emphasizing here the pronoun your composite, because then something changes, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's inactive for 6 years. The Unabomber comes back with a vengeance in 1993, sets some bombs out there to different people, including 2 fatal ones eventually in New Jersey and again in Sacramento, California. And he's also writing letters to the New York Times and others. But somehow another composite comes out. Tell us what you know about that.
Well, I was called by my mother, and she says, they put another composite out, Robert, and it looks like you.
That is right. And we're going to put that up on the screen for people to see that. But tell us now what happens there.
Well, I called the FBI, and they were now located in San Francisco, and the guy didn't even know that there was another artist besides this, the one that they had do the new composite. And I was kind of critical of that. I said, well, heck, they didn't even call me up. It's a sighting, and I knew things about it, and they should check everything, all the information that they've got. Be careful. It doesn't necessarily mean that I do the next sketch or anything like that, or the redo. But the FBI kind of fought me on this thing, but I said, well, the nose is a long nose. It was so different from the original sketch, because I've got more deep set eyes. I'm getting older now. It doesn't look like there's deep set. When I was younger, but I got a long nose. My mouth, this part here was a lot longer than Kaczynski's, and I knew that area of it was definitely different. It was a whole lot different. It looked more like me, and that my hair is curly like that. When it depends on the time of day, if I'm sweating or something like that. But my hair was sweaty. The time I had the picture, I just went down there. You'll see the picture. I didn't prepare myself for that picture. I didn't try to make myself look like the composite. I just I got some goggles that were, because the artist made these Ray-Bans look like so big. There wasn't any glasses like that. Ray-Bans are smaller in size, a good quarter inch smaller at least in height. Anyway, I had to use protection goggles that you would use if you're doing something with machinery. And I just couldn't believe how close my picture was to that composite. So
let's be clear here. The picture of your face, Robert, you're saying looks like the second composite. I will put her name out. Her name is Jeannie Boylan. She was some kind of a sketch artist. And for some reason, before I got to Unabomber in task force in July of 95, someone anointed her composite as the one they're putting out there in the media.
Her and anything. I'm not trying to be upset with her. She did a good job of this witness recalling somebody 6 years later, and I think that my face got morphed into it. And
I think there's an argument for that. Yes, and if folks sign on to YouTube or our website, they'll see these pictures.
I'm not trying to say that she's not good at what she did. She did the poly class. I don't know what other ones she's done. I've only seen that one example, the poly class composite that they did of the murder. But that's the only one I know of. And they used her, but I went to the press in Nanaimo there, and the guy came out, a reporter, and took that picture, and it just kind of went viral. I had a crew come up from L.A. and black out the house, and they did that. I have it on my website, about an 6 or 8 minute clip on the lookalike,
Yeah, I watched it. I suggest anyone should check out that website, your website, and we'll come back to that. But I'll never forget, her composite got so popular, and of course, eventually Theodore J. Kaczynski was identified as the Unabomber through his brother David, and it got so popular, and people were making T-shirts and coffee cups and baseball hats with the Unabombers. Her composite sketch that she actually tried to copyright it or trademark it. I forget which one.
I'm not into that stuff for some reason.
Legally prevent anyone from making money off it instead of her. I'm not sure if she succeeded in that regard. Maybe like public source information at that point.
I don't think so. I think that when you got something that's publicized that much.
Yes.
It's like the browser with Bill Gates. He tried to make sure that nobody could use he would be the sole person with a browser, and they found out that no, it's everybody needs it. It's a good invention, but you can't do that,
But it I don't know, an analogy, if I did a profile on an unknown offender and it was really close. I mean, you never know when you're doing it, just like you didn't know when you're doing the sketch. You're hoping this is as close represent. I do a profile, and then 6 years later, Another profiler comes along, does it. It's virtually the same, maybe the one or two little things, and then they go and make an arrest somehow. I mean, let's face it, the arrest of the Unabomber was really not based on the composite sketch. It was
That's right.
The language analysis that I did, and of course that the brother David recognized.
I was only trying to help.
Of course.
Yeah.
And we knew when I got involved, we knew it was probably a good sketch. Whatever one Kaczynski saw, because he went dark, he didn't offend again for 6 whole years.
Well,
so
she
that
didn't
was a
get
clue.
into it in 1993. I think she might have done it in 1993, but she wasn't into it when 87.
Exactly, when he started bombing
I
again.
get the credit for making them hide if it was the picture.
You may have saved some lives even through the early one. We've been doing the talk here. Any questions?
No. You guys are good. Keep going. I'm just sitting back enjoying it.
Well, we're going to wind it up here, but I mean, it must be some level of frustration. I mean, ultimately, the guy was caught. And Robert, what I know about you, that's probably all you really cared about in the long run. However,
well, I was happy that they got him. I knew it was him the minute they walked him in, because one of the things they told me, the two witnesses, he walked with a hop. And he was walking. If you notice, Kaczynski has a big long stride, and he uses the fore part of his foot. That's a way you walk when you want to make speed. He just got used to where, he would walk a lot of places. I guess living in Montana, I guess he just had the habit of walking with a hop.
Although he may have had ankle cuffs on, which could have possibly altered his gait, but maybe the hop was still there to begin with. All right. But I just want to reach out a couple of things to tie this together. I believe you watched the 2017 then Discovery Channel, later Netflix series Manhunt Unabomber. I was the consulting producer on that, and I gave as much information as I could to the writer and director. I always say it was about 85% accurate. Certainly they compressed characters or composite characters, compressed time. And we really didn't get a chance to talk about two separate composites. It may have been mentioned, but at the same time, I wrote my third book, A Journey to the Center of the Mind, Book 3.
Mm-hmm.
And the last chapter is 200 pages on the Unabomber case. You may have read that, or maybe I sent you that chapter, I forget. But in neither case, either the miniseries, Manhunt Unabomber, or my book, did we really go into detail. I remember saying to you, Robert, if there's a second edition that comes out, I'll fix that. Or if there's of the miniseries, I knew that wouldn't happen. But I never knew I'd have a podcast someday. And I told Ray, I said, Ray, we got to get this guy on. We got to straighten this story out. You've told it in different versions, but I wanted to give you like a whole hour here, of course, to go through your background. And in a way, it is unfortunate. I do think your composite looks more like what Ted Kaczynski actually looked like, certainly when he was arrested. We're going back. Your composite goes back, 30.
It's not my best. It's not my best composite, but I was really good in that one area that I was talking about, the mouth and enough that it put, it stopped Kaczynski from trying to place bombs. He mailed them after that.
You're absolutely right. It changed his MO, which some serial offenders do, not all. And let me add one last thing here. When we finally made the arrest, I was inside his cabin. We took all of his personal documents out, his diary, his journal, his autobiography. And while he wrote in code about the bombs and his experiments with this composite of the explosive material, but he actually put in there in English that when he would place his devices, he would put like chewing gum or some kind of cotton or something in his mouth to make his face look larger. So he was actually taking forensic countermeasures, thinking if someone ever saw him, he'd want to distort his face a little bit. At least he tried. I'm not saying it worked.
That's really interesting to me. That's the first time I heard that.
Yes.
And that makes me feel like I'm right about him seeing himself in the picture.
Yep. That was his way of disguising. Nowadays, all they have to wear is a COVID mask. You still see some people wearing them.
Yeah.
In some areas. But back in those days, you walk around with a surgical mask, you look pretty weird. But
usually you're robbing a bank or something,
Well, of course. And he didn't want to make it look that obvious as he put his wooden 2x4 down, which he hollowed out and put in the explosive material and the tacks and glass and things like that, which designed to rip flesh, which fortunately, I remember Hugh Scruton was killed in Sacramento. The device before that but a few months later,
they told me how gory it was. Yeah,
it was a very gory scene, and he was so proud of himself in his personal writings when he finally killed someone after his 9th or 10th bombing. Ray, why don't we wind things up here? Any final parts to this for Rob?
No, I'm just, Robert, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge and expertise in areas of police sketch and art. I have one question, though. What was the difference between those sketches that you did for law enforcement and working with the others that just wanted your artwork? Was there a big difference?
I didn't tell them what I did. I didn't have a easel saying I was a composite artist for the police. People didn't know that I did that. It was just a sideline that I'm pretty modest about things.
You can tell.
But I do talk about it these days here and there. But maybe I'm wrong because I could have made some money out of it. You know, if people would say, hey, you could make some money out of this. I need to have some sort of retirement. Artists don't make a lot of money, you know. I got my Social Security and a little pension. So,
you're still out there. If Robert Exter, that's EXTER.com.
I could draw better than I ever drawn. You know, I could do work. I could do the police work even better now with all the knowledge I have.
Well, officers out there, keep Robert in mind, and folks, if you're obviously you go into a trial and do sketches there. I know you did that in the
only a couple times.
Case of the but the submarine that went up and hit the Japanese tourist boat. That was a tragic scene.
It's a real competitive field when it comes to the courtroom stuff. What the media does is they have one artist, and all of the different stations will just pay that one artist. So these other artists are out of luck. And I don't live in a big city, so I'm really, I'm removed from even competing. So,
well, Jim and I can attest to the fact that the media is very tight with their money.
Yes.
You can't blame anybody for that, but.
Well, nowadays, of course, yes. Again, Rob Exter, thank you so much for coming on board. RobertExter.com. Check out his website, different pictures in post-production. We'll put some of the sketches up that we talked about here. If you're only listening, check coldredpodcast.com or the YouTube version of this, and you'll learn a lot about sketch artistry and how it's evolved over the years. So, everybody, thanks again for listening, maybe watching Cold Red. Please like us. Please subscribe to us. Go on coldredpodcast.com and keep listening and watching, and we'll be back another week or so. Ray, thank you. And Robert, one last time, thanks again.
You're welcome. It was fun.
All right, guys. Take care.